Hi, everyone. I don't even know where to start, but I feel like my whole life has been turned upside down. My name's Ethan, and for the last 6 months, I've been stationed overseas. The only thing that's kept me sane during this time has been the letters from my wife, Sarah. We've been married for 10 years, and she's the love of my life, or at least, she was until everything started unraveling. Sarah and I met in college. She had this way of lighting up a room, the kind of smile that made everything else fade. We built a life together, small but full of love. When I was deployed, she promised to write every week. For a while, she kept her word. I'd get these long, heartfelt letters that smelled faintly of her favorite vanilla perfume. They were my lifeline. Every word reminded me of home and everything I was fighting to protect. Then, a few months ago, the letters stopped. First, I thought it was the mail. Stuff gets lost out here all the time, right? But weeks turned into months, and the silence became deafening. One day, during a rare quiet moment, a buddy of mine handed me a letter from back home. Not from Sarah, but from a mutual friend. The words on the page hit me like a punch to the gut. Ethan, there's something you need to know. People are talking about Sarah. There's a man, someone from her work. I don't want to believe it either, but you deserve to know the truth. I felt sick. My mind raced. Could it be true? Sarah's letters had been full of love, full of us. But then I started replaying our last few calls. She'd been distant, distracted, always in a rush to hang up. I'd brushed it off as stress, hers and mine. Now I wasn't so sure. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that it was all just a misunderstanding. Gossip, jealousy. People love to stir the pot. But doubts started creeping in, and I couldn't shake them. I began having these vivid nightmares. Sarah laughing with another man, their hands intertwined. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, her name on my lips. I still held on to hope, though. Hope that when I finally got back home, this would all turn out to be some cruel joke. But deep down, something felt off. The letters were gone. The connection we once had felt like a distant memory. Then came the rumor that shattered what little hope I had left. A friend back home mentioned seeing Sarah at a party, draped on some guy's arm, her smile brighter than I'd seen in years. They thought I was dead. A forged telegram, they said. I don't know how much more I can take, but I have to know the truth. I have 2 weeks until leave, 2 weeks until I confront whatever's waiting for me at home. I'm terrified of what I'll find. What would you do if you were in my shoes? 2 weeks felt like an eternity, but my leave finally came. I boarded the plane with a pit in my stomach and Sarah's name pounding in my head. Every second felt like a slow countdown to something I wasn't ready to face. As we touched down back home, my hands were trembling. It wasn't from battle fatigue this time, it was from fear. The drive to our house was quiet, too quiet. I'd imagined Sarah waiting at the door, running into my arms like she used to. But as I pulled into the driveway, the place was dark and lifeless. Not even the porch light was on. My heart sank. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar creak of the floorboards under my boots echoing in the silence. The smell of home hit me like a bittersweet memory, lavender and vanilla, Sarah's favorite candles. But something was different. There was an unfamiliar scent in the air, like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. I set my bag down and walked through the house in a daze, half expecting Sarah to leap out and surprise me with a hug and a "Welcome home, soldier." But there was no one in the kitchen, no one in the living room. The house was cold, empty, until I heard it. Laughter. Muffled, intimate laughter from upstairs. My blood ran cold as I followed the sound, my footsteps heavy on the stairs. The laughter grew louder, clearer. It wasn't just Sarah's voice. There was a man's voice too. I reached our bedroom door and froze. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open with trembling fingers. There they were. Sarah was sitting on the bed, her hair tousled and glowing in the dim light. She was wrapped in a robe I had given her for Christmas last year. And next to her was a man. He was shirtless, casually draped across my side of the bed, a smug look plastered on his face. I recognized him instantly, Paul Sutton, her boss. Time stopped. They both looked up at me, and Sarah's face drained of color. "Ethan?" she stammered, her voice barely audible. Paul didn't even flinch. He smirked like the arrogant bastard he was, as if daring me to do something. My fists clenched so hard my knuckles went white, but I didn't move. Couldn't. My whole world was shattering in slow motion, and all I could do was watch. "You thought I was dead?" I said slowly, my voice barely a whisper. "Is that it?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, I got a telegram. Said you were gone. I didn't know." My knees buckled, and I sat down on the edge of the bed, the weight of her words crashing down on me. "You got a forged telegram," I spat. "And you just moved on? With him?" Paul chuckled softly.
"Hey, man.
"It's not what you think." "Shut up," I snapped, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You don't get to talk." Sarah reached out to me, but I recoiled like her touch burned. "Ethan, I swear, I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought you were gone. I was so lost, and Paul was there." "Stop." My voice broke. "Just stop." The betrayal was suffocating. The woman I had fought for, bled for, dreamed of every night in the trenches, had given up on me. "Did you love him?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Sarah hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. I stood up, the air thick with tension. "I need to think," I said, my voice hollow. "I can't do this right now." I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear Sarah sobbing behind me, but I didn't look back. I stumbled down the stairs, out the door, and into the cold night air, gasping for breath like I had just been dragged out of deep water. Everything I knew, everything I believed in, was gone. I don't know how long I sat in the car outside our house that night, staring at the steering wheel like it held all the answers. My mind was a war zone. Flashes of Sarah's laughter, her letters, her betrayal. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to make it all go away, but I couldn't. Eventually, I started driving. Nowhere in particular, just away. The quiet hum of the engine was the only sound in the car, but my thoughts were deafening. Sarah's face kept appearing in my mind, and I couldn't shake the image of Paul lounging on our bed like he owned the place. I had trusted her with everything. How could she throw it all away? Somewhere along the way, I ended up at the edge of a small lake we used to visit when we first started dating. I parked and got out, the cold night air biting at my skin. The moonlight reflected off the still water, but my insides were anything but calm. I sat on the shore, clutching one of Sarah's old letters I'd grabbed from my duffel bag. It was one of the early ones, full of love and promises. Her words cut deep now, like the sharp edge of a knife. "I'll always wait for you, Ethan. No matter how long, no matter how hard. You're my forever. Forever." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Forever had turned out to be 6 months of loneliness and a forged telegram. The next morning, I returned to the house, still unsure of what I'd do. Sarah was waiting for me in the kitchen, her face pale and drawn. She had been crying, her eyes were swollen, and her hair was a mess. She looked broken, but I couldn't find it in myself to care. "Ethan," she started, her voice trembling. "Please, just let me explain." I held up a hand. "I don't need your excuses, Sarah. I need the truth. All of it." For the first time, she didn't look away. "I thought you were gone," she said, her voice cracking. "The telegram, it said you were killed in action." I was devastated. I didn't know how to go on. And Paul, he was there. He told me to take things one day at a time, but it turned into something else. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Ethan. I swear." I stared at her, searching her face for some hint of the woman I thought I knew. "And when you found out the telegram was fake? When you knew I wasn't dead?" She looked away, shame flooding her expression. "By then, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you, Ethan." Stop," I said, my voice cold. "You didn't want to lose me, but you had no problem replacing me the second you thought I was gone. Do you have any idea what it was like over there? Every day, wondering if I'd make it home, clinging to your letters like they were the only thing keeping me alive, only to come back to this. Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I was weak, Ethan. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." I wanted to believe her, but the image of her and Paul was seared into my brain. "Love doesn't do this," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't forget." Paul showed up later that afternoon, bold as ever. He strolled up the driveway like nothing had happened, his smug grin making my blood boil. I met him halfway, and he had the audacity to hold out his hand. "Ethan, look," he started, but he didn't get to finish. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized I'd moved. He stumbled back, clutching his face, his arrogance replaced by shock. "That's for ruining my marriage," I spat. "And if you ever come near her or me again, I'll make sure you regret it." Paul scrambled back to his car, and I stood there, chest heaving as he sped away. Sarah watched the whole thing from the porch, her face a mix of fear and hope. "Ethan," she started, but I shook my head. "I can't do this, Sarah," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you." I packed a bag that evening and left, my heart in pieces. I didn't know where I was going or how I'd rebuild my life, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay. The last thing I saw as I drove away was Sarah standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to look back, to hold on to some shred of what we had, but I couldn't. Not after what she'd done. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll find a way to forgive her, or maybe this is the end. All I know is that betrayal changes you, takes everything you thought you knew and burns it to the ground. And now all that's left is ash. What would you have done in my place?